Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, on Saturday in the SEC, there's a sneaky good game with the Florida Gators traveling on the road at the Vanderbilt Commodores. Who do I think is going to win this game? Let's break it down. Now, Florida's 6-4 and 3-4 in the SEC to start this season, and Billy Napier's first season as the Florida head coach coming over from Louisiana Lafayette, and he has done a decent job at Florida in his first season. They've had an up and down season, but they've still had a pretty good season. They started out in week 1 with a 29-26 win over Utah, and that was a great win. Utah is a really good Pac-12 team. That was a great win to start Billy Napier's tenure at Florida. Then they lost to Kentucky 26-16, kind of a letdown game. Kentucky came and beat Florida at their own turf. That was a tough loss for Florida, but then they bounced back and beat South Florida 31-28, and that was a good win there, even though they did struggle against an inferior team. Then they lost at Tennessee 38-33, and Florida has not lost to Tennessee that often in the last 2 decades, and that was a very tough pill to swallow for Florida. Then they beat Eastern Washington 52-17. That was a good win. Then they beat Missouri 24-17. A close win, but a win was a win. Then they lost to LSU 45-35. This was a tough loss. LSU's having a great season, and LSU, again, like Kentucky, came to their building and won. Then they lost against Georgia on a neutral field 42-20, and Georgia just dominated this game. It could have been a lot worse, but Florida at least kept it respectable. Then they beat Texas A&M on the road 41-24. That was a good win because Texas A&M is having a really struggling season. And then they beat South Carolina at home 38-6, and South Carolina's kind of falling apart lately, so that was a good win for Florida. Quarterback Anthony Richardson in the South Carolina game had 112 yards and 2 touchdowns and 96 rushing yards and a touchdown. Anthony Richardson, you can tell he could be a star. He's a great runner, and he's very talented, but he's going to have to improve in the passing game if he's going to be able to reach his full potential, maybe make it into the NFL. Running back Montrell Johnson, 161 yards and a touchdown, and running back Trevor Etienne, Travis Etienne's brother, had 100 yards and a touchdown. Both are fantastic running backs for Florida, and both could definitely be in the NFL. And wide receiver Caleb Douglas at 52 yards, a solid wide receiver for Florida. And on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Ventrell Miller had 5 tackles, and cornerback Jaden Hill had 3 tackles for Florida against South Carolina. And Florida's defense has been pretty solid. They have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but they're going to have to improve on offense and defense if Florida wants to be a really, really good team in the SEC. Now, on the Vanderbilt side, they're 4-6 and 1-5 in the SEC. Start the season, and Clark Lea has done a fantastic job at head coach. He finally got a SEC win for Vanderbilt, something they have not done in 3 years, and this has been a much better season for Vanderbilt than they've had in the past. They beat Hawaii in week 0 63-10, and that was a good win on the road. Even though Hawaii is really struggling this season, to beat them by that much showed a lot of people that Vanderbilt is a better team this year. Then they beat Elon 42-31. This was a much closer game, but they still got the win. Then they lost to Wake Forest 45-25. Tough loss. It was their first loss of the season. They really tried to compete against a really good Wake Forest team. Then they beat Northern Illinois on the road 38-28. Good win to get a road win out of MAC school. Then they lost at Alabama 55-3. That was a tough loss. Alabama just dominated Vanderbilt. Then they lost to Ole Miss 52-28. A little bit more competitive against Ole Miss, but they still could not get the win. Then they lost at Georgia 55-0. Like the Alabama game, they just could not compete. Then they lost at Missouri 17-14. This was a very close game. They could have won this game, but Missouri found a way to win. Then they lost to South Carolina 38-27. Very close game here. South Carolina is really struggling lately, but still Vanderbilt was competitive. But then they finally beat Kentucky on the road 24-21. And that was a great win for Vanderbilt because they have not gotten an SEC win, like I said, in 3 years. This is a big win for the program, big win for Clark Lea to really get his team inspired to maybe believe that they can start winning some games in the SEC. Quarterback Mike Wright had 184 yards, a touchdown, an interception, 126 rushing yards, and a touchdown against Kentucky. He's a dual-threat quarterback. He's very solid. He doesn't turn the ball over too much, even though he had an interception against Kentucky, but he's very solid, and he needs to definitely improve a little bit in the passing game, but he can run, and he's a very talented quarterback, especially for what Vanderbilt's had recently. Running back Ramon Davis, 129 yards and a touchdown. Wide receiver Will Shepard, 88 yards and a touchdown. And wide receiver Quincy Skinner Jr., 55 yards for Vanderbilt against Kentucky. All are solid players on offense for Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt actually has some decent talent on offense. And on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Cordell Taylor, 3 tackles, and defensive lineman Christian James with 2 tackles for Vanderbilt against Kentucky. Vanderbilt's defense cannot stop the best teams in the SEC on offense. Alabama and Georgia, they just can't do it. But against some of the SEC teams that are more on their level, Vanderbilt actually has been pretty decent on defense, and their defense is improved overall, and I think their offense is improved as well. So who do I think is going to win this game? This game is at Vanderbilt, and I think that does help Vanderbilt out a little bit. Vanderbilt's home field advantage is not the greatest in college football. They don't have the best fans base in the world. They don't have the best stadium in the world. But Vanderbilt's home field advantage is still going to help them in this game. Vanderbilt's coming off a big win, their first SEC win in a long time, so a great win for Vanderbilt, and I think that's going to inspire Vanderbilt to try to win this game, especially because they're still bowl eligible if they win out and go 6-6, and Vanderbilt has still stuff to play for. They're 4-6 right now, and if they get this win, they could still make a bowl game. Florida's already made a bowl game, and Florida could maybe slip up in this game because they are 6-4 and they don't need this game to make a bowl. But Florida is the more talented team here. You have Anthony Richardson. You have a dynamic offense. You have great tailbacks, receivers for Florida. Florida's defense is better than Vanderbilt's defense, even though Vanderbilt has improved. I think Florida's still going to win this game 28-21 over Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt can win this game. Again, it's at home. They have a lot to play for. They're very inspired after their big win over Kentucky. But I think Florida has too much talent. I think Billy Napier is going to have his team focused, and Florida still is going to want to maybe be able to win out and make a decent bowl game. I think Florida still has stuff to play for as well, especially improve for next season. I think Florida's going to show up to play, and I think they're going to beat Vanderbilt in a close one, 28-21. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Florida or Vanderbilt's going to win this game and why, and I will see you next time.